Hi everyone. Today Ellie, Tegan, Tennille, Chloe and I will be telling you about the Centre Against Violence, and which is our company, our organisation we got to interview, and we'll start by giving you a brief overview from Tennille and I. So today I'll be discussing briefly the history of the Centre Against Violence, also known as CAV. It was formerly known as the Upper Murray Centre Against Sexual Assault, which was established in 1992 and only dealt with sexual assault, not family violence. When the Women's Refuge fell into financial difficulty, Upper Murray Centre Against Sexual Assault helped it to get back onto its feet again. When the Women's Refuge finally went into receivership, Upper Murray gained money in their own right and changed their name to the Centre Against Violence. A community-based board of management has been implemented for managing the organisation, Associations Incorporation Act of 1981. As the diversity of programs within the organisation expanded and with the restructuring of the organisation, it was now able to offer assistance to men, women and children who have suffered any form of family violence, and also invest in preventative programs. These preventative programs are aimed more at children and young people to help them before their lives end up on the wrong path. The way the refuge operates is vastly different from a few years ago, where many women and children were placed into one large house. Today, it is more likely to be a flat or a unit where the mother and her children can start to rebuild their lives and relationships without the fear of violence being in the forefront. CAV are continuing to grow and expand with centres in Wangaratta, Wodonga and Benalla, and they do outreach in Myrtleford. By the year 2020 or 2021, all staff who will be employed at the Centre Against Violence will need to be social worker qualified, which is great news for all the current intake of social work students at La Trobe. The history of an organisation is important for a social worker, as it can give them some perspective of how the organisation started and why it was started. The progression and growth of the organisation can be a clear indicator of the services needed in a community. If service were not needed, there would be no growth. The Centre Against Violence is a community-based, not-for-profit organisation. The Children and Family Services branch of the Victorian Government Department of Health and Human Services supply the majority of the funds given to CAV. The federal government is another source of funding, with their contribution primarily going towards services involving family and violence dealt with by the organisation. In order to gain funding, organisations must abide by Human Services Standards Policy, which states requirements for department-funded services. There has been an influx of funding to organisations that provide help and services to the victims of violence in the last 2 years, in particular domestic or family violence. This is largely due to Rosie Batty and the tragic death of her son Luke at a local cricket match. He was murdered by his father. The public outcry was so loud, and his mother Rosie Batty campaigned hard to bring about awareness of family and domestic violence and to change the way in which it is viewed. Rosie implored victims to reach out for help. The government could not ignore this national disaster any longer and increased funding dramatically to organisations helping victims of violence. As with most organisations, there never seems to be enough funding. Centre Against Violence is the same. There is so much more that they would like to do, so many more programs that they would like to create. Mary Taylor stated that CAV would like to do more outreach if there was more funding, would like to do more work with men, would like to do more work with children, would like to run more mentoring, if only there was more funding. Occasionally additional funding is required for special projects and is obtained from different sources. Bequests can also be made to the Centre Against Violence, and these are most welcome. Governance is the system by which a committee ensures an organisation's responsibilities are met. It is a framework of operating for organisations and can be comprised of authority and accountability, direction and control in an organisation. It is a process. There are two main components of governance, these being performance and compliance. Organisations are formed for a reason, and the performance of an organisation can determine if it is meeting its purpose. Performance can be measured through feedback, planning and reporting. Compliance community organisations are set up to be accountable. This means that they must meet the community expectations and comply with the legislation and government requirements such as service and contract obligations, paying taxes and insurance. The Centre Against Violence is managed by a community-based board of management. It comprises a chief executive officer, a chairperson, a quality management representative and several board members. The board is made up of a variety of persons with differing backgrounds and experiences, both personal and professional, male and female. An example of this is social workers, police members, lawyers and members from academia. All board members have experience in various areas of social work and social justice and work together to bring about change for the better.
The Centre Against Violence operates under a formal functional structure. It is an incorporated association, which according to McDonald is a non-profit secular organisation, which is given legal identity under various state associations and corporations acts. As a non-government organisation, it is required to invest any surplus money into meeting aims and objectives of the service and not back to any shareholders. The benefits of an incorporated association is that it allows it to become a legal entity and act as a legal structure independent of its individual members. The management of the organisation is by volunteers who make up the Board of Management, or the committee. The committee consists of a president, vice president, secretary who is also the CEO, treasurer and other members. Virginia Mansell-Lee states that the board generally helps in decision making with money and policies, as well as strategic decisions to allow further advancement for the organisation. The board also consists of subcommittees to address these processes. The business of the association must be managed by or under the direction of a committee. The committee may exercise all the powers of the association except those powers that rules or the acts require to be exercised by general meetings of the members of the association. Structure can be defined as the patterns of relationships within the organisation. The rationality and goal direction can define an organisation. These create the structures and processes in order to achieve a common purpose. The structure of CAV is reflective of the many services it offers its clients. Due to the multidimensional aspects of violence, these are needed to ensure high-quality specialised services can be offered to meet the individual needs. Services are divided into sexual assault and family violence services and programs. These roles are also influenced by a variety of government legislation, policy and procedures. The various roles are also in place to help support staff in achieving the common aims and goals of the service. That being to reduce the incidence and impact of family violence, sexual assault and other forms of violence. Thus can be seen in the hierarchy of formalised roles. An upstream approach can be seen to be used by CAV in the way they challenge dominant social structures and as evident in their feminist approach. A feminist approach will also impact on roles and responsibilities as well as structures and hierarchies within the organisation. All staff hold the same qualifications as social workers, therefore there is no hierarchy according to qualification. The Chief Executive Family Violence Manager work together as a leadership team. They oversee sexual assault and family violence teams. As an incorporated association, the Centre Against Violence is subject to the Associations Incorporation Act of 1981 and must also comply with the Associations Incorporation Reform Act of 2012. In complying with these, the organisation has a statement of purposes and rules, which is set out to guide the board members and written in conjunction with the guidance of the Act. The Centre Against Violence is governed by policies, guidelines and legislations set out by the Victorian Government's Department of Health and Human Services. Department-funded organisations need to meet the accreditation from a particular chosen review body. Service providers are required to undertake certification review within the standards once every 3 years, as well as participating in mid-term audits. The review process seeks to ensure that people experience the same quality of service by all providers. The Human Service Standards Policy regulates the requirements for department-funded service providers that receive funding as per the standards and registration under the Children, Youth and Families Act of 2005. The Centre Against Violence has a quality policy outlining the commitment to the Human Service Standards, which also state goals, mission and how they will optimally achieve to operate in line with these standards. The policy ensures the organisation is held accountable for utilising quality management systems designed to ensure the provision of excellent services for clients. Some policy, legislation and guidelines that the Centre follows include some of the following. The Centre Against Violence is a respondent to the Code of Practice for Specialist Family Violence Services for Women and Children 2006 and the Practice Guidelines for Women and Children's Family Violence Counselling and Support Programs 2008. Team members are required to work in accordance with these guidelines. Policies and procedures within the organisation also help to guide and support the way in which employees carry out the work they do and will also influence structure. These policies are reviewed through feedback and team meetings which occur on a monthly basis. The Centre Against Violence states that the domain of our practice and expertise is the delivery of specialist sexual assault, family violence and therapeutic children's treatment services. In applying the delivery of these services, the Centre Against Violence provide the following. Information in regards to the Family Violence Protection Act of 2008 about options and resources available to women and children in assisting with decision making. Also, refuge supported accommodation for women and children escaping domestic violence when needed. The majority of these clients come from police referrals. Also, crisis care, a support line available 24/7 all year round. Advocacy, providing support in family violence, sexual assault and problem sexualised behaviours is available and helping clients to connect with other services, locate resources and seek legal assistance. Counselling is provided, it is free and it is also provided for a recovery service to women who have experienced abuse. Crisis, short-term, medium-term and long-term counselling are available. Services to children under the age of 10 with problem sexualised behaviours and those aged 10 to 14 who have sexually abusive behaviours. Assessment of children, young people is used to determine associated risks or outcomes for these behaviours. Therapeutic intervention is used to assist children to make a positive adjustment and to end sexualised behaviour.
In this section, I'll be reflecting on the organisational culture at the Centre Against Violence. Working in family violence and sexual assault can be exhausting work. It's demanding and confronting. This can lead to burnout and high staff turnover. Often within this area of work, the progression for staff can be limited and can impact on job satisfaction and professional growth. The Centre Against Violence combats the challenging nature of the work in several ways. CAV encourages self-care on an individual basis, but also uses it as a preventative measure integrated into the organisation. Staff accrue a generous amount of leave each year. The management team has an open door policy and always welcomes staff to discuss concerns and find resolutions before they have a chance to escalate. CAV ensures social workers within the organisation have regular supervision, and for new graduates this is done fortnightly. CAV manages caseloads for staff to ensure an even balance. The CAV team engage in reflective practice and regular debriefing. CAV work as a supportive team, with all staff having input on the management of the organisation. Professional growth is valued, with staff selecting their own professional development and pursuing areas of interest. Staff also go through regular appraisals and develop work plans for future work. In this section, I'll be reflecting on the structure of the Centre Against Violence. The organisational structure is very clear and is built to be strong. Mary Taylor describes COV as an upstream organisation. They believe they work from a feminist perspective to challenge dominant social structures. I agree that CAV has many qualities that relate to the upstream metaphor. CAV encourages social workers to look for opportunities to explore and challenge the processes within organisations. I would also describe CAV as an organisation as flux. They are constantly changing as they undertake regular review and respond to feedback, the needs of community, changes in legislation and funding. However, as an organisation, to have the most effective impact in their work, they must work within the pre-existing limits and structures. Using downstream thinking, CAV must have some stability and fixed structures within to be a strong organisation. CAV's organisational perspectives are grounded in their feminist ideologies, and theories are used to understand and analyse organisations. These can fit into a theoretical frame. Looking at CAV and feminism, I believe it fits into a human relations frame, which align organisational needs and human needs, and are based on an empowerment image of leadership. As a group, we've discussed and reflected on what it might be like to be a social worker at the Centre Against Violence. Through our research online, as well as through our interview with Mary, we have developed a broader understanding of the organisation. A theme that stuck out to us was the management team's consideration to each employee. We found through talking with Mary, we gained a sense CAV is a positive organisation to work within. We noticed the organisation as a whole really cares about the well-being and development of their staff and acknowledge family violence, sexual assault and crisis work can be demanding, challenging and can emotionally be destructive. CAV supports staff by facilitating activities that assist in self-care, ensuring workloads are divided evenly. Staff undergo supervision as well as extra leave being available. CAV also highly value ongoing learning by engaging in professional development. This is something we believe to be important to job satisfaction and career growth. We also noted the positive aspects of working within a feminist framework in order to empower individuals and groups and facilitate change within the community. In summary, we believe being a social worker at the Centre Against Violence would be a positive and supportive role with potential for growth.
The Centre Against Violence has a very clear goal, and that is to put the client and the client's needs at the forefront of the social worker's focus. CAV aims to avoid clients feeling forgotten or distrustful of the organisation. They build trust and relationships with their clients through their transparency and aim to work with integrity and always keep the client's integrity in mind when working with anyone. The Centre Against Violence has a client feedback form in which they have mostly received positive feedback, with clients noting that it was a safe space, the staff were respectful and went beyond what the client expected, and that they were treated with integrity and not looked down on when they were in a vulnerable state. I believe if I were required to use the services of the Centre Against Violence, they would do everything they could to make me feel comfortable and safe, and to help me in the best way agreed upon. When in such a vulnerable position, I believe it would be nice to have access to such a supportive and client-focused service. One of our team members has a connection with an individual who has been a client of the Centre Against Violence, and much of what they had to say confirmed my above statements, saying that this organisation was welcoming, respectful and client-focused, and that there was a number of policies in place to protect the client, including the option to change counsellor and ongoing check-ins from the organisation, despite not needing the service on a regular basis anymore. This client stated that they would not hesitate to use the services of the Centre Against Violence again if needed, and has been told by staff that they are always able to use the service. Now on to some first impressions. The website, which was my first point of contact of the organisation, was discreet and easy to navigate. The quick exit button on the site would be useful to many individuals worried about being seen. I found lots of information regarding policies, services and the board, which gave the impression of transparency and would likely help potential clients feel safe. The building itself is extremely discreet. There is no sign to tell passerbys that it is the Centre Against Violence, but it is still easy to find and access. There are large windows on the outside of the building, however these are all mirrored and you can't see inside the building. To add further reassurance, any windows on the sides or back of the building are also mirrored and concealed by a tall fence. However, there's still ample natural light, making the building feel open and welcoming. The foyer is easily accessible to the public, but the electronic lock prevents unwanted visitors going any further. There are security cameras throughout the public spaces of the building, and these security measures seem complex and well thought out, and if I was a client at the service, the discreetness and welcoming nature of the building would reassure me, and I would be extremely appreciative of these extra security measures.
So I'm going to briefly be discussing the improvements that the Centre Against Violence could make to overall improve the client experience. The main area that I thought that might need some improving is funding. As previously mentioned, CAV is a non-government organisation, and so they have great plans and excellent ideas for the CAV. However, and by having the power to implement these ideas into practice would improve the client experience. However, the likelihood of some of these taking place is lessened due to the amount of funding received. The Centre Against Violence would like to broaden their services to include more work with men and children. However, the funding simply isn't available. By providing services to just women, they are statistically dealing with the majority of family and domestic violence cases. However, if they broaden their services, they can increase awareness and provide services for people who struggle to find help in this area. When talking to CAV, they also mentioned their use of therapy dogs, which they are trying to implement into more of their services, which I believe would greatly help the client experience. An area that also seemed to provide some struggles for the organisation was living on the border, and the difference between the New South Wales and Victoria laws, legislations and requirements. If things between the states were to be more universal, it would make work in these areas much easier for both clients and social workers. I noticed a lot when we were given the tour of the organisation how quickly the Centre Against Violence is growing. They've recently changed office in the past 5 years and are continuing to grow. The services provided by CAV can only be improved by increasing the size of the business and increasing staff. Services provided by CAV can only be improved by increasing the size of the business and increasing staff. Although CAV have great connections between other organisations such as the police, Junction and many more, I believe that the Centre Against Violence should consider connections with other related services such as better connections between refugee centres and even childcare. This would not only build awareness of the service but allow those working in these services to have connections with the Centre Against Violence to be able to provide some insight if they see perhaps a vulnerable child. To build the service more, perhaps an area that might need some improvement is outreach. By connecting with the community, this would build awareness of the services and the availability of these services. This could include having a presence at events such as a university open day or events that take place at the university. I know myself that I wasn't aware of the Centre Against Violence or where the organisation is located before undertaking this assessment. The service is highly important to the area as it provides so many important services to so many people, as 1 in 5 women experience some form of domestic or sexual assault. With larger funding, more volunteers, more services, a larger space and more outreach, the excellent services at CAV can only be improved. So these are our references here, and that pretty much sums up everything we have.